Welcome to another episode of Socratic Satsang. This time, we explore an ancient Greek philosophical paradox known as the Ship of Theseus, which explores the constructs of identity. In Greek mythology, Theseus was a great hero known for slaying the Minotaur and safely returning rescued children to Athens. The Athenians preserved his ship as a memorial to this victory. Time rolled on, so when the wooden parts of the ship decayed, they were replaced with new parts one at a time. Slowly, years became decades and decades became centuries until eventually none of the original parts of the ship remained. That's the story. Here are the underlying questions. If every part of the ship has been replaced, is it still the ship of Theseus? If someone were to collect all the discarded original parts and reassemble them into another ship, which of the two would now be the real or the true ship of Theseus? Is identity created by form, or is identity created by the parts that make the form? Or is it the properties of the form, or consciousness, or an idea, a perceived reality? How is identity constructed, decided, or even maintained? I'm excited to explore this topic. Our speakers today are Tulip Joshi, Drake Dyke, Kirsten Everson, Denise Levine, and me, Vinod Nair. Over to our first speaker, my dear friend Drake.
So when I was thinking about this, initially I had made up my mind fairly quick on what it was, and I was certain of it until I started thinking more. And one of the things I came across was something you mentioned there by the philosopher Hobbes, who had basically said that when you have the one ship, if each piece is removed one by one over time and replaced with another, is that first ship the same ship, like our question says? And if it is, then what happens if each of those pieces were collected and eventually built into another ship? Is that ship the same ship? If so, what happens to the first? And that's where my certainty that I had prior to this sort of was up in the air, and I had to think about it more, because you can't have two of the same ship, or can you? And what makes one more that ship than the other? So that still sort of throwing that back and forth in my mind. But I think there's also something called the continued identity theory, which basically says that an object stays the same despite having pieces replaced, unless it's all done at once. So, for example, you have that ship, you totally disassemble it, and you put it together with new pieces. Well, there was no continuity there, so that's a different ship. So my thinking with the second ship is the first ship that was had piece by piece replaced still is the original ship, because that other ship wasn't ever a whole ship until after, when it was rebuilt, even though it's using the wood from the first ship. But this whole topic got me to thinking beyond a ship, which I think is the whole point. And when you think about a person, is a person the same person now as they are 10 years from now? They've got all sorts of different experiences. They've changed in a lot of ways. And over that period of time, you've probably had every cell in your body replaced, because on an ongoing basis, some things, some cells replace much faster than others, but on an ongoing basis, these cells are replacing. And it may be a little longer than a 10-year period for all of them, but eventually you've got entirely different cells that your body is made up of. So are you the same person? I would say that yes, you are, because um, it's been a gradual process. And in addition to that, we have our mind, our mental capacities, um, which are evolving, but not necessarily being replaced. And I know I'm using up most of my time here, but um, taking that even one step further, at some point in the future, it may be possible that our minds and that could be downloaded onto a future version of some sort of artificial intelligence. And that at that point, at the instant it's done, assuming that it could be done instantly, you would have two copies of you, one in a flesh and blood and one in an AI. And is that you or not? If at the instant it's transferred, your flesh body dies, does that change the relationship with that other one? So this whole thought process has raised a whole series of different thoughts and so many different ways it can go in. It's just something interesting to ponder, and I'll leave you to ponder and to give me your thoughts on that and future ideas as well.
Wow. Thank you, Drake. Denise, over to you.
I feel it quite apropos to go after Drake, only because as soon as you said that you were talking about the philosopher Thomas Hobbes, that is exactly what I was looking at. And, I love topics where you come out with more questions than when you when you initially start. So, of course, I'm always looking at everything through a metaphysical lens. I just can't help myself. So, and so I was really drawn to that kind of extension of this thought experiment to what Thomas Hobbes proposed, that, what if all of the original discarded parts were reassembled into a second ship? And, then which one is the true ship of Theseus, the one that maintained the continuous use or the one made of the original material? So it actually got me thinking a little bit about sacred sites, places like Old Sarum. So Old Sarum was an established settlement in the Iron Age, and it later became a significant medieval city in southern England. By the 11th century, Old Sarum housed a royal castle and the first Salisbury Cathedral, and that was completed in 1092. But in the early 13th century, the site was gradually abandoned, and a new city, Salisbury, was constructed nearby. And many of the original stones from Old Sarum were repurposed to build the new cathedral and the surrounding structures in the new Salisbury. So the question that begs in my mind is, so from an energetic perspective, do both locations share in the original identity? Does the essence of the old place stay rooted in the land, or does it travel with the materials that were given new life elsewhere? And this can be applied, I feel, to human beings as well, right? As far as your just shift in consciousness, your awareness, your evolution in your thinking, being, an energetic pattern as a human being. So I've had the benefit of visiting many sacred sites all over the world, and I often sense energy in these places, not just in the land, but in the buildings themselves. And it makes me wonder where the true imprint of a place resides. So this is my way of being able to relate to this topic. So some might argue that continuity, much like Drake was talking about, that continuity of purpose carries identity forward, that the new city, if we relate it back to Old Sarum, the new city inherited the soul of the old. And others might say the original materials hold the most authenticity. But from a metaphysical perspective, maybe both are true. Perhaps identity and energy aren't fixed in one location or one form, but rather layered, living on in multiple places, depending on how we interact with them and what we carry with us. So my question out to the group, and I know we haven't all finished speaking initially, but the question that this leaves me with is, what are people's thoughts on where that energetic essence goes, whether we're talking about a physical object, a sacred place, or just a person evolving over time. So lots of questions, like I said, instead of answers.
Thank you, Denise. Tulip, you want to go?
Sure, you want to go first and I can go after you, whatever you...
Yeah,
Okay.
you can go.
Sure.
I love what Drake and Denise said, and I'd like to continue on that same line of metaphysical, because I've been giving this a lot of thought myself. If we talk about the soul, or we think about the energy within the consciousness, if that's our real identity. So here's the thought. Now, I have Asperger's or autism. Does my soul carry the same autism? If it doesn't, and it's a neurotypical soul, then it won't be me at all. It'll be another person. So I'm not sure, like we said, what our essence is. Another thought is that in many of the books and movies that we see, we are given to understand that after death, you're regenerated to your youngest and most vital, best form of your life. So does that mean your maturity also goes backwards? Your sense of all the wisdom you've gained over the years, does that also go backwards? Is that part of who you are? Is that external knowledge? Or does it just, become part of who you are right from inside? Questions that just boggle my mind. Over to you, Tudor.
So, so the first point is memories. I believe memories make stories even after people pass. The second is intentions make you who you are, and they evolve with time and circumstances depending on the language or the time you're born, the place you're born. You have your great philosophers, scholars, heroes. So it's the intention and or the essence which remain, but it just changes. The third point is that something like a very, very interesting, I think this is very, very powerful and profound. So my dad passed in 2020, and I have one of his holy beads, like one of his, the chain in the holy beads with me. And I have it inside a box, and I open it sometimes and I inhale it. It has his scent. So I'm thinking about him. He's passed 5 years ago, and I still feel his presence just because I can smell him. So that's something that I thought probably is related to this topic of ours. Yeah, these are the 3 points, and then something that Drake mentioned, what Vin mentioned. I'll come back once Kirsten finishes. I want to share something that I.
You can go ahead, no problem.
So about Drake, speaking about the physical change, you mentioned. You pointed out that are there 2 ships? In fact, no. This point, I think, Vin, I would love to hear from you, because once you did mention about the recycling. So I'll another point that you mentioned right now about the essence. Sorry. Yeah. So you mentioned about the essence, and then the physical, right? So again, I believe that the essence is the same, but once we come in this physical form, that's when the limitations start happening. And going back to one of the mantras that we chant during yoga and meditation is the Gayatri mantra, where we are chanting and we are invoking the power to transcend the limitations of the physical body so that we reach a certain state and experience the essence of the of the consciousness, the universe, or the being. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. David Hume's had this theory called the bundle theory. And the bundle theory was that everything is a bundle of our perceptions and our experiences. So if we look at the bundle theory, then it doesn't matter which ship we are looking at or whether it's replaced or the parts or not. It's more of our perceptions of the ship that decide whether the ship is the real one or not, which is, to me, a fantastic way of looking at it.
Yeah. True. Everything we experience is our own perception. That's something that, I'm putting out in one of my videos.
Who would like to go next?
Vin, if you can share your understanding of recycling, if that's possible.
Yeah, I don't think that would
Okay.
be relevant.
No. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's... Yes, please go ahead. Denise, sorry.
That's okay. No worries. I knew it was me, but so many interesting things. Like when I think about, what you said, Vin, about regenerate, and I think of reincarnation right away, which I think could be like a completely other topic, no question. There's things like the Akashic records that hold memories. And so, when I think about this a little further, and we were talking about humans now and human evolution through the lens of this Ship of Theseus theory, and I think everyone's kind of spoken to this on some level, is it does raise the question about how we maintain our identity over time. And, what you described, Tulip, about feeling your father's presence in that bead, I have a similar situation with items from my grandparents. So they're of no value. They're a very nominal value, but I feel them. I feel their presence. Now I've reached a point where I don't really need an object per se to feel the presence. Like when I'm cooking in my kitchen, and Grandma taught me how to cook. So I feel her presence with me, because if you start moving into kind of the quantum field a little bit, then, the energy never disappears, right? It just takes a different form. So, I really resonated with what you said about your father's bead and feeling that. And I believe too that, our bodies, of course, regenerate cells on a regular basis. And I apologize, can't remember who mentioned that. I think it was Drake, actually. Sorry. That happens all the time. So I think that, when our bodies regenerate cells, our beliefs shift, our experiences reshape us, yet we still say, I'm me. And that's because it's coming from our perspective. However, um, I think it's possible that our essence isn't anchored in any one version of ourselves, but in that continuity of consciousness, or the intention that kind of carries through each transformation, kind of like what we talked about when we were talking on the topic of liminal last time. So I know that I'm not the same person. I know I'm not the same person physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically than I was even an hour ago, right? Like I feel that evolution because I'm attuned to it. And I believe that we all as human beings we're all energy. That's all we are. That's all this planet, this universe is energy. So I'm kind of going off into a bunch of different tangents here, but I can resonate with everything that everyone said, because there's just so much to this when you start looking at the human being as the focal point. So
Thank you. That was lovely. My wife and I were talking about this just a couple of days back, and there are some people who are leading a normal life, they have their personality, they have everything set, and then one day they have an accident or something. Let's say they have a concussion, and after that, their personality changes. They may become happier people or more bitter people. Their likes change, dislikes change. Which one is the real person? Which one do you consider as the real one is a thought. And going back to Tulip, what you mentioned about the recycling theory, I think it would be the same what Drake mentioned initially, that many of our cells do regenerate, while some stay the same at birth. But vast majority does change. So if you are, let's say, 45 years old today, what are most of those cells made up of? If you think of the best meal that you had in 2023, 2 years ago, that's somewhere still in you. Which part, where, how much of you is made of that meal? It's so difficult to figure that out. It just boggles the mind the more you think about it. Thank you.
Yeah. And also, I'm not like raising my hand because it's just a few. So when you're saying meal, I like very often people ask where you're from or what your nationality is. And what I feel is that after you've lived in a certain place for years, because of the cell regeneration, you're eating from the same soil and you're paying taxes from that country. So you become you are that nationality. You're not like where you've come from, because that was a different you.
Excellent point.
Just on the cellular side, as I was looking into this,
Yes, Dustin.
the parts that tend to be much more consistent are the cells that stay with us are within the cerebral cortex, the lens of the eye, and the heart. And so thinking on those is kind of like those are three of the main parts that I feel like make the essence of a person, right? Your mind, what you see, how you experience the world, and our heart. And so that's something that is that continuity that stays with us. So even when our roles change, our perspectives, beliefs, so forth, there is still this strand, right, that stays, that does stay with us. And so I think it's an interesting part when we're looking at the ship and suddenly everything, right, is gone. And when we were talking about this earlier, I think of that in terms of when our body is fully gone, right? When we die, and there's so many different ways of perceiving then, okay, so then who is that person, right? Is that it could just be, in some traditions, the body dies, and that's all, right? And some it's the essence of the person goes on and it's this individual person in another being, like in another state, like heaven. And in others it's fully integrating into the essence of the world. So it's, or the universe, or how I would say. So to me it was the same with looking into this topic. There were just so many more questions than this was the part of like liminal space of this might be one of those places where you do just stay there because I'm not sure what those answers are.
Thank you, Kirsten. Wifey? Who's next?
I think what Kirsten said is about heart and mind. That's true. It's the way I look at it, it's intention and memory again, right? The intentions in the heart and the memory is the mind. And then, like you said, when it's like recycling, I was telling Vin, but for some reason he's seen that it's not a topic about, death.
I was mentioning this topic. I mean, the conversation Kirsten and I had a few days back, and what we were talking about was also experiences that we've had with metaphysical or with spirits or souls or ghosts. And in most cases, things can be interpreted both ways. There can be some other explanation for things, which brings a question. Like we were talking about this one guy who got possessed, and then after that, a priest was called and exorcism was done, and at the same time, it was later found out that he had a, a rare strain of malaria that caused brain fever and would make someone die in 5 days. Luckily, he got treated just in time. And and of course, he was 100% sure he was possessed. The doctor was 100% sure that he just had malaria and his brain was up in the clouds. So it really does make me wonder as to how much of what we feel or see is something that's happening from within, just our own experiences that we pop up, and how much could actually be real. And then we come back to the question of what is real. So it's just something that sends you into this loop again and again. I felt like this in the 80s when I watched the movie Terminator for the first time. And I think I was in my teens. And it just had me in this loop that this guy comes back in time and he's going to save a lady who's going to give birth to a kid, and that kid is going to be his kid. And how can this happen? How is this? And you're just in a loop. I find myself in something like that, even the Ship of Theseus. Thank you. Anyone who'd like to go next? Yeah, Denise.
Oh, please go ahead, Drake.
Okay. I was just thinking a lot of the things I've been reading lately involving medical science and a lot of the advances that are going on. One of them has been developing stem cells from other cells in the body and then being able to use them, grow them into anything. And I was sort of thinking that's like replacing parts of the ship. But this time you're using your own ship parts and just reforming them into something else. So it's sort of another take on the ship. If you're using your own cells to create new parts of yourself, I would think it's still you, but you're changing them. So if in the original ship where you were putting in new pieces, if you considered that not to be the same ship, if you're using the same pieces from a ship differently, would that change the way you think about it? And again, in this case, I think no, it's still the same ship or the same person. And but it just it was amazing how the current things going on in the modern world are thought about and relate to something thousands of years old. I'm not sure when the Theseus theory came out, the Ship of Theseus, but amazing how you could always apply these concepts to things even well into the future, and there'll always be philosophical questions to answer.
Wow.
Thank you, Drake. Denise, over to you.
Well, truth be told, I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. Because now I'm completely mesmerized by what Drake just said. It really gives some food for thought. I think it was something to do with just human evolution, and I think I actually mentioned the Terminator movie for the pop culture in a previous episode as it relates to AI and things like that. But I do believe that, like, if we look at human beings, we're always trying to evolve to our best self. In most cases, not always. But usually when people look back at their lives, they can say, I've accomplished this, I've done that, I'm started out as this, and now I run my own like whatever it is. But if you take all of that away, and I'm kind of pulling off of Dr. Joe Dispenza's kind of theory, and he's a medical, I think it was is a chiropractor by trade, and then did a lot of research on neuroplasticity and a lot of work with understanding how the brain works in meditation, and the changes that we can make in ourselves, and being able to change our personality or our personal reality. And I find that interesting because I've had the good fortune of knowing a good handful of people for, like 50 years. One of my oldest friend, we've been friends for 50 years. And that what drew us together as friends was out of circumstance initially in grade 1. Now I'm giving away my age, but anyway, um, but we were drawn together by circumstance, but we've somehow managed to stay friends for 50 years. And we both changed and evolved and grown over a 50-year period. But something Kirsten said about, the heart, there's still, even though there's room for change all the time and evolution, um, there's something about the essence of the individual that stays the same, that that has appeal to it. And this might not be coming out right, and I'm trying to relate it back to our topic, but I just find it interesting that we can go through all these changes, and I don't mean material changes, I mean inside, like inner change. And I don't believe we are the same person. I do believe in that kind of reassembled idea. And of course, I understand the physicality that Drake has described, which was very interesting. But it's good to know that as human beings, we have that ability to evolve and grow at whatever we feel that is best for us. There isn't any particular, achievement that we have to achieve as a race, as a human race. And it's kind of cool. So I think we all are ships of Theseus, and we're all different. Like the ship is different for everyone.
Wow.
I don't know if that made sense, but
Beautiful.
It makes sense. Over to you, Drake.
Yeah, just had a quick sort of aside. I thought it was interesting that both Vin and Denise had mentioned Terminator in the conversation. And I was thinking a different 80s Schwarzenegger movie might be appropriate. And that was Total Recall, where they had memories sort of implanted in them. And it was questioning reality there too. So with this sort of a funny little aside that I was thinking of.
Interestingly enough, I actually mentioned Total Recall in the very first podcast that I was part of here. But we should invite Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think, into the podcast, and 'cause it seems like his movies are relatable in these topics. It's funny.
We should end this one with "I'll be back."
Oh God.
I have a thought. is the essence of a person just decided by who they are, what they look like, or what uh, direction they're going in and what their personality is like? So, for example, if there is a person who is got a functional life, they go to work, they have a family, everything's good. And then one day, uh, they catch some kind of infection and a couple of toes catch the infection, couple of their toes. And those toes just start going bad. It hurts all the time, can't walk, can't think, can't work, can't do anything. So this person's life is beginning to nosedive because they can't earn much, because they can't work. Their family life is going down, their moods are going down, everything's going down. This is the person in their entirety as they are. But if a doc says, I need to chop off these couple of toes, and I can give you some good prosthetics that will function just as well, and the person goes ahead, he does the surgery, he loses his toes, he gets those prosthetic toes, but his mood is back, his energy is back, and he's back to being who he was. So if he's a ship of Theseus, would he still be the ship of Theseus with his old toes? Because while he had the form and the matter, he didn't have the essence because it had changed. And it's only by moving these planks that he gets to retain his position or his own personality. Yes, Ray.
So that brings up a thought for me. Are we looking at just in general the whole, the person's essence, as well as their physical, altogether as one, as being the person, or are we separating these things, saying that there is the physical parts and there's the mental part, and that and they're individual, or the essence of the person is all that really matters? Because the way that you brought this up, I think that it's still the same person as a whole, but I can see how the person might have changed with that miserable attitude and everything when they had those bad toes, and went back towards what they are, their real self, once they had the artificial ones, right? So it's quite an interesting concept, and makes you think about it again in another light, to consider the separation and what constitutes the being, the whole.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, anybody? Yes, Denise.
I can give a real life example of what you described, Vin, because my father has had 2 amputations in the last 5 years, and he's got rampant diabetes, and you name it, he's got it, kind of thing. And he he's the kind of person that could go anywhere and turn wherever he is into a social house. So he goes to Starbucks and he talks to everyone. He gets around in his electric wheelchair, and when I see him before and after these particular amputations, he was in a lot of pain. Actually, everything you described was very similar to what he went through. The pain just takes over, and he's not able to. He wasn't able to function like he normally is, be that social, happy person, because obviously he's in pain. He got fitted for a prosthetic limb, wore it for a day, and it was just like, well, that's too hard. So, and that's fine. That was his decision. But he is in such a happy place now that he doesn't have that pain anymore. So the essence of who he is, it came back or shone back through, even though he's missing parts of his physical body, so to speak. So it to me, and Drake had posed the question, you know, are we all these individual parts? Or are we everything? And I think we're the sum of all parts, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. All of that it makes up our energy. Because my dad is still my dad by way of who he is, the social being that he is, even without those physical parts, so to speak, that he's missing. In fact, one might say that he's even happier because he's not in any pain, or he's not. He's found a way through resilience to be able to still live a life that is happy for him, and it's his perspective. Now, someone else might look at him and go, "Wow, that sucks," right? You know, he's had a couple of amputations. He's in a wheelchair. What an awful life. But they're not in his shoes. Bad, and that that was not a pun. So, but they're not seeing things from his perspective. So I think it was, I think it was you, Vin, that talked about perspective and perception. And I think that really does make a difference for us as individuals, by way of, you know, are we one or are we all separate, by way of who we, those different parts, that what they make up.
Thank you. Yes, Juno.
So what Denise mentioned about your dad, and about this ship of Theseus, I think the environment that makes a difference as well, right? Because if your dad, he was nurtured, and you know, he's got love and he has people around him. Similarly, the ship, if it was elsewhere, depending on their temperament or what kind of people, the resources and so forth, or the intentions of those people, it wouldn't have happened. It would have just been long forgotten. And also what Vin mentioned about, so that's the external environment, and you know, external and internal. About, you mentioned about the body parts being, you know, the person getting better. It's again about, it works both ways. It's internally, if you start feeling good, externally it shows, in the other way around. So it's environment as well.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, anybody? Okay, I think it's been an interesting conclusion. I mean, a discussion, and I'm still where I was at the beginning. Still in the paradox, and still thinking about it as we conclude. But it's been a beautiful session. And any last thoughts, anyone? Okay, lovely. So thank you very much, and see you next time.